The 1970s saw the birth of the video game industry, starting with simple yet groundbreaking titles like Atari's 1972 classic, Pong. The industry has exploded from these simple origins, growing into a global giant worth over $180 billion. No industry has ever experienced such rapid growth, in such a short period of time, as the video game industry. Despite claims in recent years that the industry is in decline, the truth is far more complex. To understand the evolution and transformation of this dynamic sector, let's journey back over 50 years.
Don't panic, this is what the last 97 hours have been about.
Many early publicly available interactive computer-based game machines utilized creative methods to mimic displays. These weren't technically video games in the strictest sense, but they laid the foundation for what was to come. Before the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5, there was the Nimitron. It didn't have fancy graphics or complex storylines, just a classic strategic mathematical game called NIM. The Nimitron was created by physicist Edward Condon and was showcased at the New York World's Fair in 1940. Visitors at the fair could play NIM against the Nimitron. They would input their moves using buttons, and the machine would respond with its move. It was a massive hit at the fair, and visitors loved playing NIM with a machine that could respond to their moves. It was reported that visitors played the Nimitron about 100,000 times. When asked how he came up with the idea, Condon simply replied,
"I was talking to a friend during a lunch break, and the idea hit me."
Almost 10 years after Nimitron, Bertie the Brain, a massive computer standing 4 meters tall, could play tic-tac-toe against a human opponent. It was built by Joseph Cates and was displayed at the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto in 1950. While Bertie the Brain wasn't called a video game at the time, the term wasn't widely used yet, it did share many key characteristics with what we now consider video games. Players used an illuminated keypad to input their moves on a 3x3 grid, just like in classic tic-tac-toe. After 11 years following the creation of the Nimitron, in 1951, the game of NIM experienced a revival in popularity. British engineering firm Ferranti played a significant role in this comeback by constructing a custom-built computer named Nimrod. Nimrod was specifically designed to play NIM and is widely regarded as the first computer game. These early machines didn't use regular screens with moving graphics. While they used light bulbs for display, this method lacked the interactivity that defines modern video games. During World War II, significant advancements were made in computing technology, primarily to break codes and conduct complex calculations. Machines like the British Colossus and the American ENIAC were developed for wartime purposes but laid the groundwork for future computer development.
We call these machines computers.
With the rise of mainframe computers in the 50s and 60s, universities and research institutions started acquiring them. Popular models included the powerful mainframe computers such as the IBM 704 and the innovative PDP-1 computers. Mainframe computers were incredibly expensive in the early days of computing. Only a handful of institutions, primarily universities, research labs, and government facilities, could afford to own and operate them. For example, the IBM System 360, one of the iconic mainframes, had a starting cost of around $200,000 to $300,000 at its introduction in the 1960s. Another notable computer, the PDP-1 from Digital Equipment Corporation, cost around $120,000 when it was released in 1960, and only 55 units were ever sold. At the forefront of this innovation wave were students, particularly those in engineering and computer science programs. A prime example is William Higinbotham, a physicist who had previously played a crucial role in the Manhattan Project during World War II. He led the electronics group at Los Alamos National Laboratory, responsible for developing the electronics required to trigger and measure the atomic bombs. In 1958, he would go on to make a surprising contribution to the world of entertainment. Little known to some, he's also the mind behind Tennis for Two, a game recognized as one of the first forerunners of video games. Unlike modern video games with high-resolution screens, Tennis for Two used an oscilloscope, a scientific instrument for displaying electrical signals. The oscilloscope screen showed a side view of a tennis court, with a horizontal line representing the ground and a vertical line representing the net. In 1962, things began to change. Steve Russell, a computer programmer at MIT, envisioned a game where players could engage in spaceship dogfights in a simulated space environment. Inspired by the Edward Elmer Doc Smith-Lensman series, the concept for the space combat game emerged with the arrival of the PDP-1 minicomputer at MIT. Equipped with a vector display, a common technology of the time, the PDP-1 paved the way for video games that brought science fiction battles to life. Players would navigate their ships, represented as lines and dots on the screen, engaging in intense dogfights against opponents. But Spacewar was unique in many ways. A two-player mode game, it is considered one of the earliest examples of a space shooter game. Spacewar established the core mechanics of space combat games like piloting a spaceship, engaging in dogfights with missiles, and navigating a simulated space environment, incorporating basic physics like inertia and gravity. This unique theme and gameplay made it a massive hit at MIT, spreading to other universities with PDP-1s. This established it as the first widely distributed computer game. With the rise of microcomputers in the 1970s, programming languages like BASIC became widely used, thanks to its simplicity and the fact that it was often included in the realm of early personal computers. With BASIC, users could write simple programs for various purposes, including creating games. This opened doors for a wave of creativity and experimentation in the early days of computing. The 1970s is the era where it truly began. From the rise of video arcade games to the birth of video game consoles, the 70s was truly a great time for video games. During this era, video games were placed alongside pinball machines and other mechanical arcade games. It began with Nolan Bushnell, an electrical engineering student from the University of Utah. Bushnell encountered Spacewar while attending the University of Utah, where the game was popular among the computer science community. He saw the potential to turn Spacewar into a coin-operated arcade game that could reach a wider audience. However, this task was easier said than done. Adapting a complex computer game to a commercial arcade environment, using the available technology was incredibly challenging. He showed his work to Ted Dabney, who was working as an electronics technician for various companies, including Ampex, where he met Nolan Bushnell. Ted Dabney agreed to develop the hardware and software needed for a coin-operated version of Spacewar. They jointly established Syzygy Engineering and started developing what would eventually be known as Computer Space, the world's first commercially available arcade video game. While Computer Space wasn't a commercial success, it sold over 1,500 units, generating more than $1 million in revenue, an amount equivalent to $7,284,000 in 2023. Nevertheless, it did prove that there was a market for arcade video games, which paved the way for future games. After developing Computer Space under the name Syzygy Engineering, the company was renamed Atari Incorporated in 1972 due to trademark issues. Nolan Bushnell realized the importance of creating games that were easy for the general public to understand and play, a lesson learned from the relative complexity of Computer Space. In 1972, Atari released Pong, developed with the technical expertise of Alan Alcorn, one of the company's earliest employees. The first prototype was installed in a local bar, Andy Capp's Tavern in California, where it quickly became a hit. When the machine stopped working, Atari was called to fix it. Upon investigation, they found that the machine had stopped because the coin mechanism was jammed due to an overflow of quarters. Following the success of the prototype, Atari began producing Pong arcade cabinets. The initial production run was 12 units, which sold out quickly. Each unit was sold for around $1,200. Atari's Pong arcade cabinets were a massive hit. They reportedly earned $35 to $40 per day, which was far more than any other coin-operated machine at the time. But Atari was soon caught in legal battles with Magnavox, the company behind the first home video game console, the Magnavox Odyssey. In 1974, Magnavox filed a lawsuit against Atari for patent infringement. The issue arose because Magnavox had held a patent for the Odyssey, one of the earliest video game consoles, which included a table tennis game. This game was released before Atari's Pong, which looked remarkably similar. Ultimately, Atari and Magnavox settled out of court in 1976, with Atari agreeing to pay $1.5 million as licensing fees to Magnavox for their patent. This settlement allowed Atari to continue producing Pong and other video games without further legal challenges from Magnavox. By 1973, Atari had filled 2,500 orders for Pong arcade cabinets, and at the end of 1974, they had sold more than 8,000 units. With production costs significantly lower than the sales price, Pong generated substantial profit margins for Atari, roughly $9.6 million in revenue. Atari struck gold with Pong. Not only was the arcade game a smash hit, but their home Pong consoles were a massive success too. That's a massive win for Atari and a sign of things to come for the video game industry. Many other companies began developing their own versions of Pong, with many manufacturers copying the simple ball and paddle mechanics, leading to a flood of Pong clones in arcades across the United States. The success of Pong and its clones ignited a boom in the arcade game industry. In just 2 years, the industry saw a massive surge. In 1975, just 7 companies were in competition, but by 1977, that number had surged to at least 82, with over 160 documented models released in that year alone. Over 500 home console models based on the Pong concept were created during this period.
They made a home Pong console, so you can play it at home. And then there was another one, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. And another one! There was like 9 million fucking Pong consoles!
By the end of 1975, the arcade market had fallen by about 50% in terms of new game sale revenues. The industry recognized the need to move beyond simple ball and paddle mechanics to capture and maintain players' interest. With the release of Atari's next arcade game, Breakout, in 1976, the industry saw a comeback in mainstream popularity. Inspired by Pong, Breakout brought innovative gameplay and introduced brick-breaking mechanics for the first time, renewing interest in arcade games. Nolan Bushnell envisioned a single-player version where the players controlled a paddle at the bottom of the screen, using it to bounce a ball upwards into a wall of bricks. With each level, the challenge intensified, offering a unique twist on gameplay for the thriving arcade industry. Thanks to Steve Jobs, who was working at Atari at the time, was tasked with creating the game. He enlisted the help of his friend Steve Wozniak to design the circuit board. Breakout sold around 11,000 arcade units, with each arcade cabinet sold for around $995, leading to millions in revenue for Atari. Atari's early success with games like Pong was overshadowed by financial struggles. Their rapid growth demanded more funds to fuel new product development and expansion. Early legal problems and a drop in arcade sales had also reduced Atari's funds. In the 1970s and 1980s, Warner Communications bought several companies to grow its influence in media and entertainment. Known for movies, music, and publishing, wanted to get into the electronic entertainment and gaming industry. They saw potential in Atari's brand and technology, especially in the new home video game market. This led Warner Communication to buy Atari, Inc. for $28 million on November 29, 1976. This allowed Atari to expand and improve its video game and home computer technologies. Around the same time, their main rival Magnavox was preparing to release their own cartridge-based system, the Odyssey 2, in 1978.
And new voice games, only from Odyssey 2, where the keyboard is the key to greater challenge. Why Odyssey get...
In the 1970s, under Warner Communications ownership, Atari saw a revolutionary transformation in home video game consoles, with the innovation of the Atari 2600, one of the most iconic consoles of all time. Before the Atari 2600, video game consoles offered a limited selection of built-in games. 2600 revolutionized the industry by using cartridges.
Drop Atari Pac-Man into your Atari video computer system and you're playing the hottest game.
These cartridges were like mini games you could swap in and out, letting you build a collection without having to buy a whole new console for every game you wanted to play. Released in 1976, just 1 year before Atari 2600, the Fairchild Channel F became the first console to introduce the use of cartridges. However, it did not achieve the same level of popularity as the Atari 2600. The 2600 also popularized the use of the joystick controller in home video gaming. This design became standard for many future consoles and influenced controller designs in the industry. Atari, recognizing the need for variety, made a crucial move. They opened their platform to third-party developers. Companies like Activision, Parker Brothers brought fresh ideas and high-quality games like Pitfall, River Raid, Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Demon Attack. Atari's phenomenal success with the 2600 console led to a gold rush mentality. Many companies flooded the market with low-quality games, overwhelming consumers and tarnishing the video game industry's reputation. Atari itself wasn't innocent, approving rushed games to capitalize on the initial craze.
Because its new and exciting games are now priced lower than ever. Then why are you buying the Atari 2600?
By the late 70s, the video game market was crashing. The home video game console market was oversaturated with similar products from companies like Atari, Magnavox, and Coleco. These consoles offered limited and repetitive gameplay. The market was flooded with dedicated systems, but newer, more desirable cartridge-based systems emerged, making dedicated systems obsolete. Retailers were left with an excess stock of unsold dedicated consoles, and game developers and manufacturers faced significant financial losses. The Fairchild Channel F and the Atari 2600 were both pricey systems. Adjusting for inflation, they cost approximately $800 and $940 respectively, making them tough sells. The crash of 1977 taught the video game industry valuable lessons about market saturation, consumer preferences, and the importance of innovation. In the late 1970s, Namco, a rising star in the Japanese arcade game industry, licensed several of Atari's games for distribution in Japan, including Pong. Japan had a thriving arcade market before Pong, but it primarily consisted of electromechanical games like crane machines, skee-ball, and shooting galleries. A notable arcade success in Japan was Periscope, originally called Torpedo Launcher. Released in 1965 by Nakamura Manufacturing Corporation. This submarine simulation game provided players with an innovative electromechanical experience, allowing them to use a periscope to locate and destroy ships. Periscope was also introduced in the United States in 1966 and quickly gained popularity in American arcades. With the release of Space Invaders in 1978 would mark the first mainstream breakthrough in Japan. While working at Taito Corporation, a Japanese developer named Tomohiro Nishikado wanted to develop a game that could showcase the capabilities of the microprocessor technology recently introduced in arcade machines. Before developing Space Invaders, Tomohiro Nishikado had already made a significant mark in the gaming industry with another groundbreaking video game title in Japan in 1975, called Western Gun. Taking inspiration from the classic Western genre with gunslingers and showdowns, this game was groundbreaking for being the first to introduce human-to-human combat in the world of video games. Recognizing its potential, Midway Manufacturing, a prominent American game developer and distributor of the time, secured the rights to publish Western Gun in North America. They rebranded the game as Gunfight and likely made adjustments to appeal more directly to Western audiences. For Space Invaders, Nishikado drew inspiration from popular science fiction themes, especially the concept of defending Earth from invading aliens. Influences included movies like Star Wars and War of the Worlds. It was also the first game to include background music during gameplay, featuring a simple 4-note loop that added to the immersive experience. But it was the clever mechanics of the game that was so innovative. While programming, Nishikado realized an interesting fact. The computer could render the animation faster when there were fewer aliens on the screen. This meant that as players destroyed aliens, the remaining ones moved quicker because the computer had less work to do drawing them all. Instead of fixing this as a bug, Nishikado decided it actually made the game more exciting. As the number of aliens decreased, the remaining aliens became faster and harder to hit, adding a surprising challenge. It became a cultural phenomenon in Japan. Soon it was everywhere from shopping malls, corner arcades, restaurants, grocery stores, bars, and movie theaters all over Japan. The game generated significant revenue from arcade machine sales and coin-operated gameplay. In its first year alone, Space Invaders earned Taito over $600 million in revenue from game machine sales and coins, selling approximately 100,000 arcade units in Japan.
Especially like Space Invaders. Zapping those little devils from outer space. It's fun, but personally I think the whole idea of creatures from outer space is a little far-fetched.
In 1978, Space Invaders was released in the United States and achieved unprecedented success, restoring the declining video game industry and marking the beginning of the golden age of arcades. Atari 2600 achieved a significant milestone with the release of the game Space Invaders in 1980 after they acquired a license from Taito. Space Invaders was a massive commercial success, selling over 2.5 million units by 1981. In the US, the game generated substantial earnings from both arcade machine sales and gameplay. It is estimated that the game made $450 million in the first year from quarters alone and sold about 60,000 arcade units in North America, taking 65% of the global market share. In 1979, the video game industry reached a significant milestone when Atari launched Asteroids. This game stood out for its smooth, visually sharp graphics achieved through innovative vector graphics technology, which greatly enhanced the immersive gameplay experience. Set in space like Space Invaders, players control a spaceship in an asteroid field. The objective is to shoot and destroy the asteroids and flying saucers that appear on the screen, while avoiding collisions and enemy fire. Asteroids introduced several groundbreaking features. It was among the first games to employ a physics-based movement system within a 2D space environment. An interesting feature of the game was its wraparound screen effect, where the spaceship would appear again on the opposite side of the screen after moving off one side. This seamless wraparound gameplay created a continuous play area without boundaries, allowing players to navigate freely throughout the game. The 80s was a pivotal decade for the arcade and overall video game industry, marked by several major events like the release of Pac-Man by a Japanese company Namco in 1980. Considered one of the greatest video games of all time, selling over 10 billion coins in arcade games worldwide. It was designed by Toru Iwatani. Originally called PacMan in Japan, Toru Iwatani wanted to create a character with universal appeal, one that would be fun for women and children as well. In the late 1970s, Japanese arcades were dominated by games with violent themes like shooting and with basic color and graphics, popular among men. Hence, games like Space Invaders and Breakout had saturated the arcade market. Iwatani wanted a character that was friendly, non-threatening, and universally relatable. His design started as a simple concept with a yellow, circular shape with a mouth that opens and closes as it moves around the maze. It was inspired by a pizza with a slice missing. This idea came to Iwatani during lunch where he ordered a pizza, and the image of the missing slice sparked the concept of Pac-Man. The four ghosts were inspired by various sources, including Casper the Friendly Ghost, the Japanese manga Obake no Kyutaro, and Toru Iwatani's earlier game Cutie Q, which featured similar ghost-like characters. Pac-Man's most innovative aspects lie in the unique personalities and distinctive movement patterns of each character, as well as the unforgettable audiovisual experience created by its memorable music and vibrant RGB graphics. Upon its release, Pac-Man's popularity was modest in Japan, but by the end of 1980, it had become one of the highest-grossing arcade games, and fourth highest-grossing games of 1981 in Japan. Schools and workplaces even reported a decline in productivity due to Pac-Man fever.
And this is Pac-Man, one of the superstar video games in the business.
Pac-Man was launched by Midway in North America and swept across the US like wildfire. In North America, Midway initially manufactured 5,000 Pac-Man units, but the game quickly became widely popular across the country after its launch in 1980. Earning about $8.1 million weekly, over 100,000 units were sold within a year, grossing more than $1 billion in quarters and surpassing Atari's Asteroids and the film Star Wars: A New Hope in revenue. Pac-Man was the top-grossing arcade game in the US in 1981 and second in 1982, with 30 million active players by then. Its popularity among female gamers significantly contributed to its success. In the early 1980s, Pac-Man was adapted into an animated television series produced by Hanna-Barbera Productions. It was one of the first video games to be extensively licensed for merchandise, including t-shirts, toys, lunchboxes, cartoon shows, and comic books. By 1982, 400,000 units had been sold, generating $6 billion. Pac-Man remains the best-selling arcade game ever. Seeing this popularity, Atari obtained a license from Namco to produce a home version of Pac-Man for their consoles, including the Atari 2600, but it was met with disaster. In an attempt to quickly capitalize on Pac-Man's phenomenal success, Atari rushed the development of their home version. Despite compromising on quality and resulting in a game full of bugs and lacking the polished arcade experience, Pac-Man still managed to significantly increase Atari console sales in the United States. By 1982, 10 million consoles had been sold in the United States, while its best-selling game was Pac-Man with over 8 million copies sold by 1990. Atari was at the top of their game, fueled by the success of Pac-Man. They were the fastest-growing company in American history at that point. But things would take a sharp turn. That same year, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, directed by Steven Spielberg, received widespread critical acclaim and became the highest-grossing film of its time, surpassing Star Wars in revenue. Aiming to capitalize on its immense popularity, Atari secured the rights to produce a video game based on the movie. The biggest challenge Atari faced was time. They wanted the game released alongside the movie's hype, leaving only 5 short weeks for development. The final product, released in 1982, was riddled with problems. Despite the movie's popularity, the E.T. video game flopped. The game had confusing and repetitive gameplay, numerous glitches and bugs, and unclear objectives. Players were disappointed, and sales plummeted. Atari, faced with a massive overproduction of cartridges, resorted to burying unsold copies in landfills in Alamogordo, New Mexico. Atari reportedly invested around $21 million to secure the rights to develop and market the game, including a substantial portion paid to Steven Spielberg's production company for licensing. As a result, leading to an estimated loss of around $100 million for Atari. In 1984, Warner Communications sold Atari to Jack Tramiel, the founder of Commodore International, in a deal valued at approximately $240 million. The transaction involved trading stocks, rather than cash due to Atari's financial struggles and Warner's desire to exit the video game industry. Following the sale, Atari attempted a comeback with new games and consoles such as the Atari 7800. However, tough competition from companies like Nintendo and Sega proved too challenging to overcome. As a result, Atari never regained its former dominance in the video game market.